I just see on YouTube, Erik Rowan's watching. Hi, Erik. He's asked you, when did you feel you were at your peak?
I think every Olympics, you plan to be at your peak, and I would say that I actually felt very strong going into Rio, and I know that's probably surprising to a lot of people because it's a case of, I end up not able to sort of see out the race. The fact is that I got ill, and it's an outdoor sport. Things happen. I got a head cold. I got vertigo. It was actually Anne who said, "Look, you're not going to listen to me. You're not going to let me pull you from this." I had to go see the FISA doctor, so the world governing body for rowing's doctor at the Rio Olympics in the sort of in that stadium, in one of the offices up above. He did one of these sort of follow my finger, and I fell over. And he just said, "You've got vertigo." He said, "I can't let you go on a boat in all conscience. You've been pulled." And so I did have to sit in the stadium. I sat and watched the racing, the B final and the A final come down. So did. And that was devastating. But at the same time, I know going into those Olympics, I actually was in quite good shape. I was going quite well. And albeit, it's like my last experience, I felt very, very strong going into it. But just this head cold just took me, and there was nothing I could, I was powerless to do anything about it. And, 3 days afterwards, I remember, sitting with the Brownlee brothers, congratulating them on the triathlon. And I was there going, I feel pretty fit. I feel like I could probably run a triathlon with them right now, sort of thing, at that time. And it was, that was it. So that's the last time I suppose I was truly fit, was, 3 days after being pulled from Rio. But I think in terms of in a boat, the peak probably came around 2009 when I had that, got the second fastest time after Mahe. We broke the world record that day in Poznan. And it is a fast course, Poznan. Even Robbie's, record was done in Poznan, so it wasn't stuff. So it is, it was an exceptionally quick course, but I felt in very, very good shape. What had happened after Beijing, if you remember right, I had an abscess in my tooth. I had to have that pulled. I had septicemia, so I had blood poisoning. And, and it was quite a bad way. This is 2 months out from the Olympics. Managed to get myself through that. When I came back, though, after those Olympics, I had to go into rehab. And so I had what's called a Baker's cyst in my knee. So it was basically a big old, pocket of blood just sitting in the knee. And every time I did anything to it, it would just sort of bleed into this big cyst, and it was just feel like pressure. I had to have, needles to take all the pressure out of it quite often. I'd started doing a strength conditioning program with Harry Mann, or not Harry. What was he called? He's now works at the Victoria Institute of Sport. He was the reason why he always stood out for me was. He was the strength and conditioning coach for the Ulster rugby team in '99 when Ulster won the European Championships, and I was there as a boy. I was there in Lansdowne Road in Dublin whenever Ulster last won effectively the European Cup for rugby, and so he was strength and conditioning coach, and then he got to coach us, me several years later, and then that for me was the greatest feelings. It was just being sort of being next to this guy that had been close to so many of my heroes as a kid growing up, David Humphreys. It was who was the Ulster rugby captain at that point. So it's just he was a really good coach, and we did this massive rehab program. And pretty much I didn't sort of join the squad until sort of March or April that year. So that season. So from 2000 and so the winter of 2008, I just pretty much was on my own sort of little program, just with my own physio, my own strength conditioning coach with Bill. We actually went in a lot of the women's training camps. So we went to Seville with them instead of going to the altitude camps with the men, because I wasn't able to use the ergo or anything there because my knee was in quite a bad way. When it then came to the summer, I was just on flying form. And so I was so strong, so fit. And it was that thing of I was able to concentrate on my own sort of little bit of program. And I think that comes back to where I was talking earlier, was that whole thing of I wanted that sort of trust and freedom to be able to sort of do what was the right thing to get me in the best possible shape. I appreciate that, you know, within an 8, you can't have 8 people doing 8 different things. They need to all sort of come together and do one thing.
Yeah.
But you could see that it does work effectively, like what Noel Donaldson did with the Kiwi pair. You know, Erik ended up having to do more sort of strength training, and I think then it was Hamish did more ergo training because,
Yeah.
you know, no, sorry, Erik. Yeah, Hamish was sort of, yeah, I think that was it. He had to do more ergos. Erik had to do more strength training, and, you know, it obviously worked well. You know, I think there was 60% of their program was together, 40% was individualized to teach them. So, you know, when they weren't in the boat together, sort of thing.
Was that your best race, Alan? That 2009. I mean, it's an amazing. I did try to get a picture of it, but the pictures on the TV are very blurry. But you know, is it 6:33 that you did? 6:34?
Yeah, it was 6:34. Mahi was 6:33, I think. So it was. It was 0.9 of a second between us, and you know, Mahi won it in the third 500. So I think I led out to Kay. Then he and actually Cynic was right beside me, so he was at that point. Then in that third 500, Mahi just blast through, you know, myself and Cynic. And then Cynic sort of stayed in touch with me in that third 500. Then the two of us from 500 out started to just leave everyone behind. And I think people think that I was slightly quicker in the last 500, but only marginally. So it kind of sort of stayed even. But the way it looked was what actually happened was in sort of 1500 to 1750, Mahi continued to move out. I then in the last 250 just started coming at him, you know, and you know, taking chunks out of him like stroke by stroke. But he just, you know, he had enough to hold himself through to the line. And it was incredible to be part of that. And again, you know, that was one of those things of, I wouldn't even have minded if I'd have been out of the medals. It was special because I was in the medals, but I was there going, that was the best account I could have given of myself. That was a great row. I couldn't have done anything more. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, you always look back and you go, well, we can do this and we can get better and all that sort of stuff. And we always did try to focus on doing that. But I think there was just a lot of perfect conditions around that, so it wasn't stuff. In terms of the most I've ever physically pushed myself was London 2012. Was on the final of 2012. I mean, I absolutely adored myself, so did in the last 500 of that race.
I was watching that race yesterday, and I couldn't remember how close you and the Swedish guy,
Lassi
Karonen were, you know, throughout that, even in the last 500, how close you guys were.
So he was ahead and going into 500.
And he had a better run.
It was, you know, like Lassi is the camera, you know, how the sort of the camera adds pounds to you and all that sort of stuff, you know. It's just like, it's not helping me nice, it's not. But it was I think the camera made him look deceptively small. The fact is if you ever saw a podium of me standing next to him or anyone standing next to him, you know, we looked like we were his kids. And you're talking about people like Andre, who's 6'7", you know, a big, tall, rangy athlete. But, you know, Lassi was a Swedish Viking. And, you know, he would have been the king of the Vikings if, you know, if we were back in those days, sort of thing, because he was a man mountain. And so where he raced in London, you know, I think he raced at 105 kilos. And there's not a pin of fat on the guy, so there wasn't and stuff out there. And, you know, I always felt that he was going to just go up to the boat, fold it up and just put it in his pocket, sort of thing. You know, it just sort of looked like everything looked like it was sort of dwarfed, you know, next to him and all that sort of stuff. And I always was in awe of him. And to boot, he was also the nicest guy that I've ever met, and stuff out there. I have a huge amount of time for him and a huge amount of respect. And, you know, I think of all the people I raced against, he was actually one of the most, like the most gentlemanly of all of them. So he wasn't stuff out there. And so, so he was leading going in, and, you know, I had a 10 kilo deficit on him, so did in terms of, you know, of weight. and it was the sound of the crowd, you know, the Dorney roar, as they say. It really did lift me. It transcended me beyond what I was capable of doing. And it was one of those things, all the training over the 4 years had got me to 1,500 meters. But the last 500 came down to character. It came down to, you know, all the hardship, all the things that weren't quite the way you'd wanted them to be. It was almost a defiance to all the things that had sort of restricted or held you back in that 4 year period. And then it was just, you know, the being in the moment, being in that sort of environment, and, you know, hearing a roar or a cry like that from the crowd was like nothing that we'd ever had experienced. I mean, you know, and I've been to stadiums. I remember Athens 2004, watching the men's 4x100. It was the most electrifying experience it was and stuff. Firstly, it would just seem humanly impossible, the speed at which the guys went round that track. And then the fact that Britain won, you know, that 4x100, it was a real sort of like, wow. And it was, you can hear it just ripple round, you know, just that Mexican wave of sound as they sprint round it. And so it is just, like an incredible feeling. That's the feeling we got as athletes, was being, you know, both sides, just having that roar, that cry, that cheer. And I just don't think anything will ever match that until they put a roof on the Docklands and create the first indoor rowing centre, and it would replace us going to Lucerne every year. So if they did an indoor rowing, or at least a covered rowing leg, and Docklands seems to me like an ideal place to do it. But anyway, I digressed. But that crowd lifted me, pulled me up, got me across the line, and you know, where there was sort of the footage of Steve getting me out of the boat, it leave no mark or doubt about it. If it hadn't been for Steve, I wouldn't have made it to the podium, because the doctors were trying to pull me. And I think there's a bit of video clip of, like, you know, there's one guy on the radio, and he's the doctor. He's just basically come and assessed and gone, this guy's, he's done for. He's not going to make it. Steve then was like, get yourself up. Come on, come sing the national anthem with me. The girls have just won the gold in front of you. And, you know, Catherine won her gold in the double. And so I was there going like, yeah, I'll do that. That sounds like a good idea, Steve. It does, you know. And it's like, I sort of, like, I thought I was just going to throw up. Like, all part of me just wanted to sort of disintegrate. But then getting on the podium was, you know, again, then an overwhelming experience it was and stuff, you know. And you know, and I did cry, I will admit. But, you know, I'm allowed to cry. You know, it was one of those things. It was a big thing. It was you know, the first medal since 1928 for Great Britain in the single. It was my dream to stand on, you know, the highest steps, and to be there with, you know, the best in the world, and do that, and to do it at the Home Olympics. You know, it couldn't have been any more perfect for me in that sense. And where we stood, I looked up and I could see my mum and dad and my wife and, you know, my friends that were in the sort of the friends and family grandstand. So like the picture shows the big grandstand on the far side, the sort of the general grandstand. But where we stood, we could see friends and family. I wasn't allowed to get up to them. Somebody threw down a flag, and I was able to put the flag over my shoulder. But it was one of those things of, for all the sacrifices and all the things that, you know, I've been through as an athlete, I realized, you know, it became very sort of just like a flood of emotion of like, gosh, all the things that my mom and dad had done for me, all the things that my wife had enabled me to be able to go and do. That's what sort of, you know, hit me at that moment, hit me at that time. And it was, and it was a day of days, a day I'll never forget, sort of thing, you know. As such. I'm sure you've got similar memories yourself, you know, from your Olympic final, surely.
Yeah, similar. I think the wall of sound does hit you. We didn't have quite the Dorney wall of sound, but I was kind of thinking that wasn't an easy season for you, because I know there was a thing about Jurgen wanting you in a double scull. And then you went to the trials and you just you beat Matt Wells by about 3 or 4 lengths, and you were like, I'm doing the single. And that caused, you know, a lot of, there was almost kind of the sculling squad, and you were separate and
there
almost prevented. So you had to go through it. Yeah.
None of the athletes looked at it that way, but the way in which the setup was done at that point, it was very much made to reflect that. And so, you know, I think the belief was is that if I went in the double, we would have a chance of winning the medal. And, you know, seat racing that year, actually, I'd done really well in the seat racing, and we had sort of, we seriously looked at it, and we had done it in the right way. But the two sort of natural partners for me were Bill Lucas and Sam Townsend, and who ended up doing the double then. You know, and coming and being in the A final seeded with the double, but it wasn't, and it's not an ego thing of where I was like, well, I'm ahead of them and everything else, but I just was there going like, I just want to be certain that it's going to be, I'll only do it if it's for gold, and it just didn't feel to me that we were just, it was a dead cert that I'm gonna, you know, it's my performance alone is then going to be the thing that, you know, adds to these guys to then produce this gold medal. And I was there going, you know, I'd won 3 medals in the single, you know, every World Championships, you know, leading up to it, 2009, 10, 11. And I just then going, so why wouldn't I be doing the single then?
Yeah.
You know, why wouldn't that be the natural sort of place for me to be? And I did try to give it as much as I could. You know, we started off the season while I was in Seville. We were testing, you know, different combinations. We did, you know, like I said, we did the seat racing. You know, I did it. We tried it with lots of different partnerships and everything else, but nothing sort of. And they were very good doubles. Don't get me wrong, but nothing was there just going like, this is a gold. And I appreciate I'd never won a gold. I wasn't a world champion. I wasn't an Olympic champion. So I didn't necessarily have a measuring stick to put it against. But I was then also going, my singles feeling better. I can't say I regret the decision because, you know, I ended up being able to go and get the performance. I think part of the reason why that race in sort of Munich that I mentioned was so tough was because it did feel heavily. There was a lot of things stacked against me, and it was it was a case of like Alan's not listened to me, so you know, him and Bill are going to go off and do their things. And there were meetings that were had with the whole squad, excluding Bill and myself, and it felt very unfair. So it did in that sort of sense, because at no point was I trying to be. I wasn't trying to rip up the squad. I wasn't trying to sort of do anything that was sort of like, you know, I wasn't poo-pooing or, you know, saying things about Jurgen behind his back or anything there and stuff. It just felt quite unfair. And so I was there just going, right, well, we've just got to get on and just do this. And I think one of the things that Bill did was, and this is why for me, Bill is still, you know, the greatest coach, is the fact that he doesn't look at me a commodity, as, you know, here's a guy or, you know, a person with a big engine and a wingspan of this or whatever it is, and they can do this, and biomechanically, if they do this and they do all this sort of stuff, win the gold. He's there. This is Alan. Okay. And Alan's got, you know, he's married. You know, he's got aspirations to, you know, have a family, you know, in the future, this, that, and the other. And he's upset about what's happened. And so we need to now work on his mental capacity and build that up and give him the confidence to be able to go out and do the performance, because actually he's capable of doing this performance. He's capable of doing this. And he had, you know, ultimate belief in all of those things. But all he ever tried to do was enable me to be able to try and do those performances. See, he was never trying to coach me to do the performance. All he ever tried to do was enable me to do the performance. And that was the thing that, you know, I think stands him aside from a lot of other coaches, where they just go, you know, we'll square a little bit earlier. You know, don't get me wrong, he did say, you know, I had to square earlier and all that sort of stuff. But his reasoning for wanting me to square earlier was because if I did it, it meant I was better prepared to get a sharper catch, to get a better hold of the front end, to then move the boat quicker, to be more efficient, to be able to sort of spread my energy throughout the whole race, and to be able to sort of do the performance that I was capable of doing. And for Bill, it was never about, you know, is this person capable of doing it? Is do you really want it? And that's all he ever asked me was, do you want it? What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? Let's do that. And let's get this sort of thing. You know, it was the whole thing of the first time I ever met Bill, and I knew about Bill when I was down at Tideway Scullers. So I'll take you back, a little history lesson. 2002, I'm rowing with the Army. So I went to Welbeck, which is an Army Sixth Form school, did my A-levels with them. I then went to Shrivenham, which is the Royal Military College of Science, so just near Swindon. I'm rowing. I trialled for the Army 8 for the Head of the River in 2002. I get in the Army 8, and we won the Forces pennants we do at the Head of the River that year. We trained out at Tideway Scullers for about 5 weekends leading up to it. When that ended, all the various sort of captains and majors all went back to their sort of locations and bases and back to the day job as such. I kept coming back down to Tideway Scullers, and they'd sort of invited me in. I got really friendly with a lot of the guys there, and so I was traveling, sort of a 160-mile round trip from Swindon, 3 or 4 times a week, just to come to do training sessions with the team there and the squad there. And so that was obviously the March was that. In the May, we did these Wednesday night sprints. So it was basically between UL and Mortlake on the Tideway. So it's about 500 meters, and you're with the tide. So it's here, and we do it in sort of little groups of, I think it was groups of 4. So it was 4 side by side. Winner from each division goes up to the next division. Loser goes down below. And so you did this. One of the weeks I end up in the top division, and I'm in an old Ealing's boat that was I think it was a Kevlar boat. So it was not even carbon fiber, and it had 2 different shoes, so that had been sort of transplanted in. One was a size 13, and the other was a size 10. So one foot was always being squeezed on that, and I managed to beat a couple of guys in their brand new Philippes and all this sort of stuff. And so Chris Williams at Tideways, who's now the junior men's coach there, and his sons were coming up through it at the time as well, said, "Oh, Bill, I think you need to come down and have a look at Alan." And then Bill, the first time he ever spoke to me, he said, "What do you want to do?" And I was trying to be cheeky, and I was sort of was prepared that he was going to come down and say hello and all this sort of stuff. And I knew about Lou Barry. There's the bust of Lou in the club, of his head, and there's great history. And as you look on the walls in Scullers, it's all the pictures of like the heads of the rivers that they've won. And Bill's in the 6th seat in nearly every single picture, and he's about 20 degrees further forward than everyone else as well, Susan, and all that sort of stuff. And so I said, yeah, I want to be Olympic champion in the single scull. And he said, right, okay, so you're going to have to lose 10 kilos. Without blinking an eye, that was the first words out of his mouth, was what we're going to have to lose 10 kilos. That also aligns with what I would like to achieve. So let's do it. And that was it. And he then gave me a program. He looked at me, obviously, on the water. He took me out a couple of sessions, and then he said, right, I'm going to give you a 6-week program. I'm going to know if you've done it. If you haven't done it, then I'll know as well. And we then, I won my first race at Henley Town and Visitors. Was in 2002. I won senior free singles. I then won the senior free double that day as well with Matt Cape, one of the guys that was at the club. And I remember it was, I'm trying to think, it was Justin's dad from Upper Thames. What are they called? Basically, it was like the stalwart at Upper Thames Rowing Club. He was there, and Sam McKenzie was there as well.
My God.
Yeah. So the two of them, Bill to introduce me to the two of them, and I had no idea who they were at this year. And it was the whole thing of, he just said, looking good this year, a little bit of this, but, Bill, he's a bit rough this year and all this sort of stuff. And it was like, and then the following year, we won the Diamonds. And so my first ever senior win was at Henley Town and Visitors in 2002, Diamonds the following year. And it was just one of those things of, I did what Bill told me to do, and he enabled me to be able to unlock all of the potential that I had. And that was just it's an incredible feeling to be part of that.